Please welcome. Next up, the Chukchi language, also known as Lihoravetlin. This scary string of letters right here literally translates from Chukchi as language of the real people. And Chukchi is a Russified form of the Chukchi word chavchiv, which means a man who is rich in reindeer. Ah, Chukchi. Any Russian speaker will know of them from the numerous jokes such as this. На крайнем севере застрял грузовик. Шофер бьется, ничего не получается. Мимо на собаках едет Чукча, останавливается и говорит. А я знаю, что надо. Шофер, ну скажи. Чукча, дай водки, скажу. Шофер налил ему 100 грамм. Чукча выпил и говорит. Трактор надо. Maybe a bit racist, not gonna lie, they portrayed Chukchi as being very creative and innovative in a bit of a dumb sort of way. And I used to hear these jokes a lot when growing up, but strangely enough, I haven't heard any in years, honestly. All jokes aside, the Chukchi people are absolutely fascinating, and the culture is rich with customs and traditions found nowhere else on earth. The Chukchi language is native to the Chukotka Autonomous Okrug in the far east of Russia, spoken by just over 5,000 people, is part of the Chukotka-Kamchatkan language family, and is written using the Cyrillic script. Known for being the hardened people of the north and far east, they have traditionally led hunter-gatherer nomadic lifestyles, herding reindeer, fishing whales and seals, and hunting polar bears. You don't mess with these guys. There's a total of about 16,000 people who identify as Chukchi, but only about 30% actually speak the language, and it's decreasing as most young people are shifting to Russian instead. However, there are apparently some less than 100 people who claim not to speak any Russian at all and just Chukchi, which in today's day and age is honestly quite impressive. The Chukotka Autonomous Okrug is quite literally as far east as you can pretty much get before reaching Alaska. In fact, the town of Vuelen is the closest Eurasian settlement to North America. Like, look how friggin' far east it is. It's at the edge of the world. The Chukchi language is known for its use of noun incorporation. This is when nouns are incorporated into a verb, creating a new word. The closest English examples, which aren't entirely accurate and kind of a stretch, are babysit and sleepwalk. The phrase tepelarkin koranga means I'm leaving the reindeer and has two words. The same idea can be expressed using a single word, tekora pelarkin, in which the noun root kora, reindeer, is incorporated into the verb. There's honestly so much crazy stuff I could tell about the Chukchi, and maybe I'll make a separate video on them at some point later. Next up, the Chuvash language, also known as Chavashla. It's native to the Republic of Chuvashia in Russia. It's spoken by about 1 to 1.2 million people. It's part of the Oghur branch of the Turkic language family and is written using the Cyrillic script. The Turkic languages are numerous and vast, expanding from Europe to the Middle East to Central Asia to China to the far east of Russia. Chuvash stands out as being the last surviving member of the Oghur branch of the Turkic language family, and it's only very distantly related to the other Turkic languages. And don't quote me on this, but I'd compare it to kind of like Albanian being very distantly related to the other Indo-European languages. In fact, it's so different from other Turkic languages that up until the 19th century, it was considered to be a Turkified Finno-Ugric language related to Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian. This is because throughout the centuries, Chuvash was influenced by neighboring Finno-Ugric languages such as Mari of the Mariel Republic. However, such languages as Tatar, Russian, Mongolian, and Persian have added many words to the vocabulary of the Chuvash language. It's thought that Chuvash is a descendant of the now extinct Turkic Old Bulgar language, once spoken along the Volga River. Technically very distantly related to the modern-day Bulgarians, but that's a different story. The Cyrillic alphabet was originally adapted to the Chuvash language by Ivan Yakovlevich Yakovlev in 1873, and after a couple of revisions, the current version became official in 1938. This guy is apparently a big deal in Chuvashia. There's statues of him, schools named after him, and he's even called the enlightener of the Chuvash nation. The Chuvash people even had their own number system, known as the Chuvash numerals. They kinda looked like Roman numerals, but flipped. There are two main dialects of Chuvash, Viryal, upper, and Anatri, lower. The main difference being that Viryal has both the vowels O and U, while Anatri tends to just have U and replaces all O's with U's. I've never met any Chuvash people and have never been to Chuvashia, but I went to school with a friend who used to call Chuvash sometimes because it was kind of funny and also because he had some Chuvash ancestry. In case you're watching this, hi Patrick. Next up, Cebuano. It's native to the Central Visayas, Mindanao, Eastern Visayas, and the Negros Occidental regions of the Philippines. It's part of the Visayan branch of the Austronesian language family, written using the Latin script, and it's one of the most widely spoken languages in the Philippines, with estimates as high as 20 million people. Which is crazy because I had never heard of it before, and I've asked a bunch of friends and family and they had never heard of it before, and that's like the population of like 10 Latvias. Cebuano is also sometimes referred to as Bisaya, which I have to say when researching, some people say no, they're different, some people say they're dialects of each other, it's hard to say. Honestly, sometimes with languages as big as this, it's sometimes hard to say, because you can argue both ways. The language is spread over like a million different islands, and even though there is a standard version, every town, village, and island have their own little different way of speaking. Cebuano was first documented by Antonio Pigatefa, an Italian explorer part of Ferdinand Magellan's expedition. The Philippines, and specifically Cebu, was one of the places that the expedition visited, and very close to the place where Ferdinand Magellan was killed, leaving his crew off to finish off the world's first ever circumnavigation. Cebuano grammar is quite complex, and may seem very strange and foreign to somebody who has never studied a language like this before. It has many of these case markers that tell you which function every word in the sentence has. But it's also a very fluid language. While yes, there are concrete rules, when speaking informally you can throw around the words in a million different ways to get your point across. This in turn makes the order of words a bit hard to follow sometimes. I'm about to give a bit of a confusing example, but just bear with me. Take these two sentences for example. Luto on sa babaye ang bugas sa lata, and luto an sa babaye ang lata og bugas. They basically mean the same thing, the woman will cook the rice in the can, but each sentence has an emphasis on a different part of the sentence. In the first sentence, bugas, rice, is marked with a directional marker, which is also reflected in the verb luto, with the suffix on. PT stands for patient trigger, which means that the rice is the patient and is the thing that's being cooked and is the important part right now. In the second sentence, lata, can, instead is marked with a directional marker, and that's also reflected in the verb luto with the suffix an. CT stands for circumstantial trigger, which means that the can is the place where the rice is being cooked, and that's the important part now. Translated kind of literally in a weird way would be like the difference between the rice will be cooked by the woman in the can, and the can will be cooked rice in by the woman. Which isn't even grammatically correct in English, but this isn't English, this is Cebuano. That was confusing and I may not have explained it very well, but now you can potentially see how strange it may be if you don't speak a language with this kind of grammar, and tens of millions of people speak it. Also, o means yes, and dili means no. The Choctaw language, also known as Chata. They originally from the southeastern part of the modern-day United States in places such as Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida. They have since been forcibly relocated to Indian Territory, more specifically southeastern Oklahoma, between the years of 1831 and 1833 during the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. Out of a total of approximately 160,000 people who identified as Choctaw in the United States, there are only approximately 9,600 speakers of the Choctaw language, most of whom were over the age of 45. It's part of the Muskogean language family and it's written using the Latin script. The Choctaw are the third largest federally recognized Native American tribe in the United States. Ever heard of the Navajo code talkers during World War II? The ones that used the Navajo language to transmit secret messages so that the Axis wouldn't understand? Well, the Choctaw did that with their language during World War I, some 30 years earlier. Legend has it that Pushmataha, the greatest of all Choctaw chiefs, treated with respect by Native Americans, white Americans, and Europeans alike, who was buried with full military honors in the Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C., had envisioned a prophecy saying that the Choctaw war cry will be heard across many foreign lands. And about 90 years later, on October 26, 1918, the Choctaw Code Talkers were pressed into service. And according to Colonel A.W. Blur of the 142nd Infantry Regiment, tide of battle turned within 24 hours, and within 72 hours, the Allies were in full attack. If it wasn't for the brave Choctaw soldiers, as well as soldiers of other Native American tribes, who knows how both world wars would have turned out, and they definitely don't get enough credit for that, so yakoke. Like many other Native American languages, Choctaw loves its verbs. And they are quite complex. A verb may have up to 3 prefixes, 5 suffixes, and some verb roots might even have infixes. The Choctaw orthography was developed by Cyrus Byington, a missionary from Massachusetts who spent nearly 50 years documenting the language and translating many written works. He even followed the Choctaw and went with them to their new reservation during the Trail of Tears mentioned earlier. His life's work is considered to be one of the most thorough and complete lexicons of a Native American language. Choctaw is one of the strongest Native American languages spoken in the United States today, which is kind of weird and kind of sad to say considering it has less than 10,000 speakers. But still, of course, there are revitalization efforts, schools, adult classes, even an app for Apple and Android. So hope is not all lost just yet. But that is it for now. Today we travel to the Tornado Alley of the south-central United States, the lush and green plains of Chuvash, went island hopping in the Philippines, and dog sleighing across the vast snowy expanses of the Russian Far East. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new, and now it's time to get on my Instagram and vote for one of these 4 to become the winner, and the one I will be learning over the next 2 weeks. Remember, please don't vote just based on the number of speakers and how useful it may seem. Vote for the one that seems most interesting and the coolest one to you. Peace out.